So welcome back. In this video, we are going to talk about the summary which array methods to use. So as I have counted since the beginning of this course, we have learned a lot of different array methods, and that's pretty incredible. But it makes sense because arrays are probably the most used data structure in JavaScript. We use arrays really all the time when we work with the data in the JavaScript, and so we now need to be able to perform all kinds of operations with them. And now the problem is choosing between the different data methods is it's not really easy, right? So especially if you just started learning about them, like you have most likely in your mind right now there is a big confusion between all these methods, and especially about when to use each of them. So to help with that, now we are going to talk about this in this summary lecture with all the different array methods plus some other techniques to work with the arrays that we have learned so far. Okay. And now I believe the best way to figure out which method to use in each situation is by starting to ask the question. Okay. So what actually I want from this method? Do I want to mutate the original array, or do I want a new array based on the original one? Or do I want an array index? Or do I want to receive an entire array element? Or do I want to know if an array includes a certain element? Or maybe I just wanted to get a new string to transfer the array to a new value, or simply loop over the array. And by asking these different questions, we can now simply categorize the methods and choose them. And first off, if we want to add an element to the original array, we can use the push or unshift. And we already talked about these methods. Of course, I will not explain them again, but there is just a reference for you to keep now anyway. If we want to remove the original and then use either the pop, shift or slice, and finally we also talk about these three other methods that mutates the original array as well, which are the reverse, sort and fill methods. And now keep in mind that we have all these methods here. You have to be very careful because they do changes the underlying array that you are working with, and that's many times it's not what we want. In fact, these methods should actually mostly be avoided these days, because JavaScript development is moving more and more in direction of using more functional, non-destructive approach, where instead of mutating the original data structure, we simply create new ones. And speaking of creating a new array based on the original array, the most straightforward method here is the map method, and the one we'll use all the time, and it loops over the original array. It creates a new array with the same length of the original. So one very nice trick to decide whether we want to use the map method or not is to ask ourselves, should the new array should have the same exact length as the old one? And if the answer is yes, then we probably need the map method. And we can also create new arrays by filtering for the condition and by taking a slice of the original array. So basically just a piece of the original. So if we want a new array where one of the item is different, so where it's replaced, we'll use the width method. And we can also flatten the original array using the flat and the flat map. And now three very important of the mutating methods, which we also call the destructive methods, are reverse, sort and splice. But if we don't want to change the original array, well, then we can use the new to reversed, to sort, to spliced methods, which will all return the brand new array. And finally, we can concat or join two arrays using the concat method. All right. So next up, sometimes we need is to an array index. And for that, we have the index of find index and the find last index methods. And now the difference between them here is that find index and the find last index can basically search for the elements in the array based on the test condition, and that we can provide in the callback function. And besides that, they're pretty similar and both gives the index of a certain elements in the array. And now if we actually need the array itself, again based on the test condition, that we use the find or find last method. So these ones are pretty similar to the find index and the find last index. but instead of giving the index, they give us the entire element that we are looking for. And in practice, find and find last are a bit more useful, but if we know the position of the element that we are going to get from the array, then we can just use at method, which will do exactly using the square brackets to retrieve an element. Next up, it's pretty helpful to know whether the array is included a certain element or not. And for that, we have include, sum, and every. So with includes, we can simply test whether an array contains a single value, while on the other hand, with the sum and every, we can specify a test condition based on the callback function. So the sum method is going to return true if at least one of the element in the array satisfies the condition, and then the every method only returns true if all the elements satisfies the condition. So these three methods returns a boolean value, so which is very helpful in sometimes if else statement or a ternary operator. So that's where many times we use one of these methods. All right, next up, all we want is to just transform an array into a string, and for that we'll just simply use join method, or we might use the reduce method, the entire array. So you might use the reduce the entire array to just one value, no matter if a string or another type. And as we already know that we use the reduce method, so in the reduce method we use an accumulator, which we can think of like a snowball, which accumulates all the values of an entire array into just one single value, and that value can be of any type. So it can be a number, string, boolean, or even a new array or a new object now. All right, so in fact we could now actually replace most of these methods that we have here with the reduce, but we don't do that because it's a lot more work to do. So in theory we could use a reduce, but for example, for and includes or really most of the other methods that we have here. And now finally, if all we want to do is just loop over the array without looping a new value, we use for each method. So remember, this is the one that doesn't create a new array, and in fact it doesn't create a new value at all we do in for each method is to basically just do some work but not produce a new value. All right, that's it. That's an overview of all the array methods that we talked about. We are actually not done yet, because I also want to briefly summarize the additional array tools and techniques that we learned through this session and the previous one, but which aren't exactly array methods. So first of all, besides all these array operations, we just look at we can also group arrays by different categories by leveraging the object of group by function. So again, this isn't a array method, which is why this is on a separate slide for array tools. Now, if we want to create an array from the scratch, you have two options. First, we can use the array from function, where we can pass in the desired length and map callback to fill up the new array, as we learned in one of the previous videos. And this is the preferred way of creating a new array from scratch. But we also use the array constructor with the new array and pass in the number of empty elements of that array should have, and we can then remember fill up the empty array using the fill method. And now in the earlier session we learned that besides the concat method, we can also use the spread operator like this in order to join two or more arrays into a brand new one. Now if we wanted to get all the unique values of the array, we can just place them in the new set just like this, and then again spread the result into a brand new array. And now finally here comes the most complex techniques of all. If we wanted all the elements that are present in the two arrays, and then we can again convert them into sets, use the intersection method on the set, and then spread the result into a brand new array. Once again, these are just a few more ways to work with the arrays that you should keep in mind. Now, okay, with this, we are finally done with the summary lecture.